I'm Cassandra, 35, and for once, I wanted to celebrate my birthday in style. After years of putting everyone else first, I saved up for a beautiful dress that made me feel special. My relationship with my wealthy sister Elaine has always been strained, but I hoped my birthday dinner would be different. I wanted to believe that family bonds could heal even with our complicated history. Little did I know how quickly my special night would turn into a humiliating disaster. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. If you've ever had family drama, ruin a special day. Growing up, our family wasn't poor, but we definitely weren't rich either. Mom worked as a receptionist at a dental office while Dad put in long hours as a construction foreman. They made just enough to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads, but luxuries were rare. From an early age, my sister Elaine and I developed very different approaches to life. I was the practical one. While other kids were dreaming of becoming movie stars or professional athletes, I set my sights on nursing. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable and meaningful work that would let me help others. Elaine, 3 years younger than me, always had expensive tastes. Even as a teenager, she'd tear out magazine photos of designer clothes and luxury cars, creating vision boards of the life she wanted. "Why would you want to be a nurse when you could be a doctor?" she'd ask me during my college years, completely missing that I genuinely wanted to be a nurse, not to mention the practical concerns about medical school costs. Our paths diverged dramatically after high school. I worked my way through nursing school, taking on extra shifts to pay tuition. Meanwhile, Elaine focused on her social life at a private college paid for by our parents, who stretched themselves thin financially to give her that opportunity. Then came Richard. Tall, handsome, and from a wealthy family, he was exactly the kind of man Elaine had always envisioned for herself. They met at a charity gala she'd scored tickets to through a friend. Within a year, they were married in a lavish ceremony that our parents couldn't really afford their contribution to, but felt obligated to help with anyway. Almost overnight, Elaine transformed into someone I barely recognized. Her clothes, her car, her home, even her speech patterns changed. She began dropping names of important people in exclusive places, clearly relishing my unfamiliarity with her new world. "You really should visit the Hamptons sometime, Cass," she'd say, knowing full well I couldn't afford such trips. "It's so rejuvenating." I might have managed to maintain some semblance of a relationship with my sister, despite our differences, if life hadn't thrown me its own curveball. At 27, I married David, a pharmaceutical sales rep I'd met while working at the hospital. 2 years later, we had our son Jackson. For a while, everything seemed perfect. Then just after Jackson's 10th birthday, David started working late. He became distant, irritable, always checking his phone. You know where this is going, right? Classic story. His administrative assistant was 24, blonde, and apparently made him feel young again. The divorce was painful, but mercifully quick, though it left me financially drained. Raising Jackson alone while working full-time wasn't easy. We downsized to a 2-bedroom apartment in a decent, but definitely not upscale neighborhood. I took on extra shifts whenever I could, making sure Jackson had what he needed, even if it meant I went without. Through all this, Elaine's life looked perfect from the outside. Her daughter Madison was born a year after Jackson, and from infancy she was dressed in designer baby clothes and surrounded by the best of everything. Family gatherings became increasingly uncomfortable as the gap between our lifestyles widened. Elaine would talk about their latest vacation to Bali or Paris, while I had to carefully budget for a weekend trip to the local beach. "Madison's starting horseback riding lessons next week," she'd announce at family dinners. "What activities is Jackson doing these days?" The truth that he was playing soccer in the community league with secondhand cleats wasn't something I wanted to share, knowing it would only invite pity, or worse, one of Elaine's offers to help out, that always felt more like charity than genuine family support. Despite all this, I was making progress. Last month, I received a promotion to head nurse in my unit, coming with a nice pay raise. For the first time in years, I had a little breathing room in my budget. That's when I decided to do something just for me. With my 35th birthday approaching, I wanted to celebrate properly. I found the dress at a boutique downtown. It wasn't designer, but it was beautiful navy blue with a fitted bodice and flowing skirt that made me feel elegant. The $300 price tag was more than I'd spent on clothing for myself in years, but I decided I was worth it. Looking in the mirror after trying it on, I saw a glimpse of the confident woman I used to be before the divorce and the struggle. When Elaine suggested dinner at Bellini's, one of the most expensive restaurants in town, for my birthday, I was surprised but hopeful. Maybe this was her way of extending an olive branch. Maybe, just maybe, we could reconnect as sisters rather than as symbols of different life choices. But I wasn't naive. I knew Madison would be there too, and my 16-year-old niece had become increasingly difficult over the years. Spoiled by her parents' wealth and enabled by their reluctance to set boundaries, Madison had developed a sharp tongue and an air of superiority that made our rare interactions tense. "Do we have to go, Mom?" Jackson had asked when I told him about the dinner plans. At 15, he was perceptive enough to recognize the undercurrents between the adults, and his past experiences with his cousin hadn't been positive. "It's just one dinner, honey," I'd assured him, "and it would mean a lot to me to have family together for my birthday." What I didn't say was that I was holding on to a small, fragile hope that this birthday might somehow bridge the chasm that had grown between my sister and me, that we might find some way back to the close relationship we'd had as children before money and status came between us. If only I'd known what was waiting for me at that restaurant, I might have chosen a quiet celebration at home instead. But hope is a powerful thing, especially when it comes to family, and sometimes it blinds us to what's right in front of our eyes. The day of my birthday started with a small but meaningful celebration at home. Jackson woke up early and made breakfast an omelet that was a bit overdone, but made with love. On the table next to my plate was a handmade card that brought tears to my eyes. "Happy birthday to the strongest woman I know," he'd written inside, along with a drawing of the two of us together. It wasn't a professional artwork by any means, but seeing how he still took time to create something personal at 15 touched my heart. "This means more to me than anything you could have bought," I told him, giving him a hug that he returned with surprising enthusiasm for a teenage boy. As I sipped my coffee, I couldn't help but think about previous birthdays. Last year, I'd worked a 12-hour shift and came home too tired to do anything but eat leftover pizza with Jackson before falling asleep on the couch. The year before that, I'd received a perfunctory text from Elaine and a gift card to a store I rarely shopped at because it was too expensive. This year would be different, I told myself. I had a beautiful new dress hanging in my closet, waiting for the evening. After my shower, I took time with my makeup and hair, something I rarely did anymore. Working in a hospital meant practical hairstyles and minimal makeup most days. I slipped into my dress, savoring the feel of the quality fabric against my skin. The rich navy blue color brought out my eyes, and the cut flattered my figure in a way that made me feel both elegant and confident. I'd splurged on new shoes, two strappy silver heels that added just the right touch of sparkle. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Gone was the harried single mom in scrubs, replaced by a woman who looked self-assured and even beautiful. For a moment, I let myself feel proud of everything I'd accomplished on my own. My phone buzzed with a text from Elaine. "Reservation at 7, don't be late." No birthday wishes, no warmth, just a directive. I pushed down my disappointment. Tonight was about new beginnings, I reminded myself. I wouldn't let old patterns ruin it before it even started. Jackson emerged from his room in the button-up shirt and khakis I'd asked him to wear. He looked so grown up that it made my heart ache a little. "You look really nice, Mom," he said, his sincerity evident. Then more hesitantly, "Are you sure about tonight? You know how Aunt Elaine and Madison can be." I straightened his collar, buying time before responding. "I know it's not always easy, but it's important to me to try to keep our family connected. And hey, maybe they've changed." The skeptical look on his face said it all, but he nodded. "It's your birthday. If that's what you want, I'll be on my best behavior." The drive to Bellini's took 20 minutes, during which I found myself rehearsing topics of conversation in my head, planning how to respond to potential comments about our apartment, Jackson's school, or my job. It was exhausting to realize how much mental preparation I needed just to have dinner with my own sister. We arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early. The maitre d' led us to a table by the window, with a view of the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk fell. Crystal glasses caught the light from the candle centerpiece, and the white tablecloth was pristine. It was exactly the kind of elegant setting I'd imagined for a special birthday dinner. "Would you care for something to drink while you wait for the rest of your party?" the server asked. I ordered a sparkling water for Jackson, and after a moment's hesitation, a glass of white wine for myself. It was my birthday after all. As we waited, I took in the restaurant's atmosphere. The soft classical music, the murmur of conversation, the occasional clink of fine china and silverware. It all felt so far from my everyday life. Around us, well-dressed couples and groups chatted easily comfortable in surroundings that made me feel slightly out of place despite my new dress. "They're late," Jackson observed after we'd been sitting for 20 minutes. I checked my phone. No messages from Elaine. "Traffic probably," I said, trying to sound unconcerned. But inside, a familiar feeling of being an afterthought to my sister was beginning to stir. I was about to text her when I saw them enter the restaurant. Elaine, looking immaculate as always, in a designer dress I recognized from a magazine, Richard, in an expensive suit, and Madison trailing behind them, her attention fixed on her phone screen. As they approached our table, I stood up hoping for a warm greeting. Instead, Elaine air kissed near my cheek, careful not to smudge her makeup. "Happy birthday, Cassandra," she said, her tone perfunctory. "That's a nice dress. Is it new?" It was the opening I'd hoped for. "Yes, I treated myself for my birthday," I replied, smiling. "I love yours too." "Oh, this old thing?" She waved dismissively. "I almost donated it last season, but Richard likes the color." And just like that, my small joy in my carefully saved-for dress was diminished. But I was determined not to let it affect the evening. Tonight would be different, I told myself. Again ignoring the voice in my head that whispered I was setting myself up for disappointment. "Sorry we're late," Richard said, though he didn't sound particularly apologetic as he took his seat. "Conference call with Tokyo ran over." "No problem at all," I assured him. "We were just enjoying the atmosphere." Madison finally looked up from her phone long enough to give a cursory hi before returning to her scrolling. She hadn't even glanced at Jackson, who shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Madison, put that away," Elaine said half-heartedly. "We're at dinner." My niece gave an exaggerated sigh but slipped the phone into her purse. "Whatever, this place looks boring anyway." "Actually, Bellini's is supposed to have one of the best chefs in the city," I offered, trying to engage her. "I've been looking forward to trying it." Madison gave me a look that suggested I couldn't possibly know anything about fine dining. "We went to a restaurant in Milan last summer that had like 3 Michelin stars. That was actually good." "I'm sure it was lovely," I said, determined to keep things pleasant. "I'd love to hear more about your trip to Italy." "It was just like buildings and museums and stuff," Madison replied with a shrug. "Mom made me look at a bunch of old paintings." "The Uffizi Gallery houses some of the most important Renaissance works in the world," Elaine interjected. "Though I suppose that's lost on teenagers." "How's work going?" Cassandra still at the same hospital. "Yes, and actually I recently got promoted to head nurse in my unit," I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. "Oh, that's nice," Elaine replied. "More responsibility for probably not much more money, right? Healthcare is so broken that way." Before I could respond, the server returned to take our drink orders. Richard asked for an expensive scotch I'd never heard of. Elaine ordered a martini with very specific instructions, and Madison requested a virgin mojito, with extra mint and no weird-looking ice. When the server looked at me, I hesitated, then decided to stick with wine. "I'll have another glass of the Chardonnay, please." "House wine?" Elaine raised an eyebrow. "Richard, why don't we order a bottle of the Montrachet for the table? My treat for Cassandra's birthday." "That's really not necessary," I started to say, but Richard was already agreeing. "Excellent choice, dear. We had that at the Sullivans' dinner party last month, remember?" The conversation continued like this through appetizers, Elaine and Richard discussing people and places I didn't know, Madison making occasional snide comments, and me trying desperately to find common ground. Jackson remained mostly silent, responding politely when addressed directly, but otherwise observing the dynamics with increasingly visible discomfort. "So Jackson, Elaine eventually turned her attention to my son. Junior year next fall, right? Started thinking about colleges yet?" Jackson glanced at me before answering. "I'm looking at State University. They have a good engineering program." "State?" Madison snorted. "Isn't that where all the local kids go when they can't get in anywhere else?" I felt my face grow hot. State has an excellent academic reputation, I said firmly, and their engineering department is nationally ranked. I'm sure it's perfectly adequate, Elaine said in a tone that suggested the opposite. Though Richard and I always assumed Madison would go Ivy League, we've been building her resume since middle school extracurriculars, summer internships, the right kind of community service. Different families have different priorities, I replied, trying to keep my voice even, and different resources. Richard, perhaps sensing the tension, jumped in. Speaking of resources, Cassandra, have you set up a 529 plan for Jackson's education? If not, I'd be happy to connect you with our financial advisor. It's probably not too late to put something together, even with only a year left. The assumption that I wouldn't have already planned for my son's education stung, even though it was partially true. I had a modest savings account for Jackson's college, but nothing like the comprehensive plan I was sure Madison had. That's very kind, Richard, I managed. I'll think about it. You know, if money is tight, there's no shame in community college for the first 2 years, Elaine added. Then he could transfer somewhere more established. Jackson's knuckles were white around his water glass. I placed my hand gently on his arm, a silent request for patience. Actually, Jackson has maintained a 4.0 GPA while working part-time and volunteering at the Children's Hospital, I said. We're exploring scholarship options, and I'm confident he'll have choices. Working during school. Madison looked genuinely confused. Why would you do that? Doesn't it, interfere with your social life? Some people have to work, Madison, Jackson replied quietly. And some people want to. It teaches responsibility. Are you saying I'm not responsible? Madison's voice rose slightly. I don't think that's what Jackson meant, I intervened quickly. Everyone's situation is different. The server's arrival with our entrees provided a welcome interruption. The conversation shifted to safer topics, the weather, a new movie release, local news. I began to relax slightly, thinking perhaps we'd moved past the worst of the tension. Then Elaine asked about Mom and Dad's anniversary gift. Have you thought about what we should get them? I was thinking a weekend at that vineyard resort in Napa. We could split it. My stomach tightened. A weekend at a vineyard resort would easily cost more than $1,000. That sounds lovely, but it might be out of my price range right now. Maybe we could look at some other options. Oh, right. Elaine took a delicate sip of her wine. I forget sometimes about your constraints. Don't worry about it. Richard and I can cover it. You can just sign the card. The way she said it made it sound like charity rather than a reasonable accommodation. I felt my cheeks burn again this time with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. I'd prefer to contribute something meaningful within my budget, I insisted. Mom and Dad would appreciate something thoughtful more than something expensive. Thoughtful doesn't have to mean cheap, Madison interjected, examining her manicure. Grandma and Grandpa deserve nice things. Madison, Richard said, his tone carrying a rare note of warning. Mind your manners. What I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. She rolled her eyes. It's not my fault if Aunt Cassandra can't afford nice gifts. Your dress is really pretty, Aunt Cassandra, Jackson said suddenly, clearly trying to change the subject. The color looks great on you. His attempt at kindness nearly brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, sweetheart. Yes, it's a nice dress, Elaine agreed. Where did you find it? That new boutique downtown? For a moment, I felt a genuine connection. Yes, actually. I walked past it after work one day and saw it in the window. I thought I recognized the style, she nodded. They carry some decent mid-range pieces. Not bad for the price point. And just like that, the moment was gone, replaced by another subtle reminder of the gap between us. As our entrees were cleared away, the conversation turned to Madison's upcoming Sweet 16 party. Elaine, animated more than she had been all evening, began detailing the elaborate plans. We've rented the ballroom at the Grand Hotel, she explained. The theme is Midnight in Paris. We're having a custom backdrop made for photos and a live band that does both classical and modern music. That sounds lovely, I said, genuinely impressed by the thought going into it, if not the extravagance. Madison must be excited. Madison looked up from texting under the table. It's gonna be fine, I guess. My friend Brianna had a Sweet 16 in New York with a Broadway performer singing so... We offered to fly in a performer, Richard said, sounding slightly defensive. You said you didn't want that. Because it would be embarrassing, Madison retorted. Like trying too hard. I caught Jackson's eye and saw him struggling not to roll his eyes. To be fair, I was having the same difficulty. Well, it sounds wonderful to me, I said. Is there anything I can help with? I'm pretty good at decorations and organization. The offer was sincere. Despite our differences, I wanted to be involved in my niece's milestone celebration. Oh, that's sweet, but we have an event planner handling everything, Elaine replied dismissively. Professional touch, you know. Of course. I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. But if you need an extra pair of hands, I'm happy to help. The Grand Hotel is like super expensive, right? Jackson asked, surprising me with his continuation of the topic. Richard nodded, looking pleased with the question. It's the premier venue in the city. Nothing but the best for our little girl's big day. It costs more for one night than some people make in months, Madison added with a smirk. But Daddy says I'm worth it. I took a larger sip of wine than I'd intended. This restaurant is pretty special too, I commented, trying to steer away from the topic of money. The food is amazing. It's okay. Madison shrugged. The mocktail is too sweet and my pasta is totally overdone. Madison, Elaine said, but there was no real reprimand in her tone. Don't be difficult. I'm not being difficult, I'm being honest. This place isn't even that exclusive. I mean, they let anyone in. Her eyes flicked briefly toward me. The implication was clear, and I felt my chest tighten. Jackson tensed beside me. Actually, I said, keeping my voice calm, I think it's pretty special to be able to enjoy a meal in a beautiful place like this. I don't get to experience restaurants of this caliber very often, so I'm really appreciating it. That's because you work all the time, Elaine said, as if this were a character flaw. You should treat yourself more. Some of us have to be more careful with money, I replied more sharply than I'd intended. We don't all have the luxury of spending without thinking. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I immediately regretted my words, true as they might be. I didn't mean that as a criticism. I backtracked. Just that different people have different circumstances. Of course they do, Elaine replied coolly. Some people make choices that lead to financial stability, and some don't. The implication that my current situation was entirely the result of poor choices, rather than circumstances beyond my control, sent a flash of anger through me. I'm proud of the choices I've made, I said firmly. I have a career that helps people, a son I'm incredibly proud of, and my integrity. Are you suggesting I don't have integrity? Elaine's voice had a dangerous edge. No, I'm not saying that at all. I insisted, though, part of me wondered if that's exactly what I meant. I'm just saying that I stand by my life choices, even if they haven't led to the same level of financial comfort. Mom works really hard, Jackson added, unable to stay silent any longer. She helps save lives, and she's amazing at what she does. No one's saying nursing isn't a noble profession, Richard interjected, in what I think he meant to be a helpful tone. It's just not particularly lucrative. Not everyone measures success in dollars, I replied. Easy to say when you don't have any, Madison muttered just loud enough to be heard. Madison, this time Richard's reprimand was genuine. Apologize to your aunt. Now. For what? Saying the truth. Madison challenged her teenage defiance in full display. Everyone's thinking it. Aunt Cassandra comes here in her discount department store dress, acting like she's some kind of hero because she changes bedpans for a living. That's enough. I surprised myself with the force of my voice. The tables nearby went quiet. I have sat here all evening listening to thinly veiled insults and condescension, trying to maintain a pleasant atmosphere for my birthday dinner. But I will not allow you to disrespect my profession or me personally. Oh my God, why are you being so dramatic? Madison rolled her eyes dramatically. It's just a joke. It's not a joke when you're deliberately trying to hurt someone, Jackson said, his voice shaking slightly with emotion. You've been doing it all night. Jackson, it's okay. I placed my hand on his arm, though I appreciated his defense. No, it's not okay, he insisted. They've been looking down on us from the minute they arrived. This isn't how family treats each other. Elaine's face flushed. You need to control your son, Cassandra. His attitude is completely inappropriate. My son is simply standing up for me, which is more than you've done for your daughter's behavior, I countered. Madison has been rude from the moment you arrived. Well, if you can't handle a little teasing, maybe you shouldn't have suggested dinner at a place that's clearly out of your comfort zone. Elaine snapped. You suggested Bellini's, not me, I reminded her. Only because I knew you wanted to try someplace nice for once, she replied dismissively. I was trying to do something nice for your birthday. By letting your daughter insult me repeatedly? Some gift. Richard tried to intervene. Ladies, please, we're in public. Like anyone here cares about your family drama. Madison scoffed. Then, inexplicably, she picked up her mocktail. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. With deliberate precision, Madison tossed the contents of her glass directly at me. The cold liquid splashed across my chest and lap, instantly soaking into the fabric of my beautiful new dress. Now you look as cheap as you are, she said coldly, as the room fell completely silent. I sat there frozen in shock, the sticky, sweet liquid dripping from my dress onto my lap. The beautiful navy blue fabric was now stained with dark patches that would likely never come out. In that moment, it wasn't just about the dress. It was about years of being made to feel less than, of having my choices devalued, of being treated as though my worth as a person was directly tied to my bank account. It was about watching my son's face contort with hurt and anger on my behalf, and realizing that this toxic dynamic wasn't just affecting me, but him as well. As I looked at Madison's smug expression, and Elaine's shocked, but notably not immediately apologetic one, something inside me shifted. The room might have gone silent, but my thoughts were suddenly crystal clear. This moment, as painful and humiliating as it was, would be a turning point. I just didn't know yet exactly how. For several seconds after Madison threw her drink, nobody moved. The sticky liquid continued to drip from my dress onto my legs, but I couldn't even reach for a napkin. I was paralyzed by the sheer cruelty of the act and the words that accompanied it. Then everything happened at once. Jackson jumped to his feet, his face flushed with anger. "What is wrong with you?" he shouted at Madison. A server rushed over with a stack of napkins. "Ma'am, are you all right? Can I help?" Richard's face had gone pale. "Madison, what have you done?" Only, Elaine seemed unsure how to react, her eyes darting between her daughter and me, as if calculating the appropriate response. Finally, she settled on a half-hearted, "Madison, apologize to your aunt right now." Madison crossed her arms defiantly. "Why should I? She's been acting all superior all night with her noble profession and her integrity. Someone needed to put her in her place." I felt tears welling in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not now. With trembling hands, I took the napkins from the server and began blotting at my dress, though I knew it was futile. The damage was done. "Thank you," I managed to say to the concerned server. "I'll be fine. We can bring some club soda for the stain," they offered kindly. "The stain is the least of my concerns right now," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. I looked up to see several nearby diners watching with expressions ranging from embarrassment to sympathy. The public humiliation added another layer to the hurt, but strangely, it also helped me find my strength. I wouldn't break down in front of all these strangers. I wouldn't give Madison or Elaine the satisfaction. "Madison!" Richard's voice was taut with anger. "Go wait in the car, now." "But Daddy!" "Now. Madison." His tone left no room for argument. With a dramatic huff, Madison grabbed her purse and stormed toward the exit, not even looking back. "Cassandra, I'm so sorry," Richard said, appearing genuinely distressed. "Her behavior is completely unacceptable. We'll pay for your dress to be cleaned or replaced if necessary." "A replacement dress won't fix this, Richard," I said quietly. "This isn't about the dress. This is about respect, or rather the complete lack of it." Elaine finally seemed to find her voice. "Madison is just going through a phase. You know how teenagers can be." Something inside me snapped at those words. Years of suppressed frustration hurt, and anger rose to the surface all at once. "No, Elaine, this isn't just a phase. This is the result of years of you and Richard teaching Madison that her wealth makes her superior to others, that it's okay to look down on people who have less, that material things determine someone's worth." I stood up, napkins clutched in my hand, wet dress clinging uncomfortably to my skin, but I'd never felt more dignified. "For years I've accepted your condescension, your backhanded compliments, your not-so-subtle reminders of the gap between our financial situations. I've smiled and nodded and made excuses for you because you're my sister, and I wanted to maintain some kind of relationship. But I won't accept this. I won't allow my son to think this is how families should treat each other. Elaine's face flushed. You're being dramatic, Cassandra. Madison made a mistake, but this wasn't a mistake, I interrupted. This was deliberate cruelty. And your response, your inadequate, half-hearted response, tells me everything I need to know about your priorities. What's that supposed to mean? Elaine demanded. It means that you care more about appearances than character, more about status than kindness, more about being right than being loving. My voice was calm but firm. And I deserve better than that. Jackson deserves better than that. So what, you're just going to cut us off because Madison had a teenage outburst? Elaine's tone was incredulous. This isn't about just tonight. This is about a pattern that's been going on for years. You've made me feel small, Elaine. Less than. Every chance you get, you remind me that my life choices haven't resulted in the kind of wealth you value above all else. And now your daughter thinks it's acceptable to publicly humiliate me on my birthday. I turned to Jackson, who was standing by my side, a protective hand on my shoulder. We're leaving. Cassandra, please, Richard intervened. At least let us pay for dinner. It's the least we can do. Surprisingly, I find myself agreeing with you, Richard. I nodded. To my astonishment, he reached for his wallet and placed several large bills on the table, enough to cover the meal many times over. Even more surprisingly, he then turned to Elaine. She's right, you know. We've allowed Madison to develop some very troubling attitudes. And if I'm honest, we haven't been much better ourselves. Elaine's mouth fell open. Richard, whose side are you on? This isn't about sides, Elaine. It's about right and wrong. And what happened here tonight was wrong. He looked at me with what appeared to be genuine regret. I truly am sorry, Cassandra. Not just for tonight, but for all of it. His unexpected support momentarily took me aback, but I wasn't ready to accept easy apologies. Thank you for acknowledging that, Richard. But apologies without changes in behavior are just empty words. Elaine stood up, her composure visibly cracking. So that's it. One incident and you're ready to throw away our entire relationship after everything I've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Elaine? I asked quietly. Given me handouts that made you feel superior. Invited me to events where you could showcase the contrast between our lives. That's not generosity. That's not love. Other diners were still watching, some pretending not to, others openly fascinated by the drama unfolding. I didn't care anymore. This moment of clarity and strength was long overdue. Jackson and I are leaving now. I need time to think about what kind of relationship, if any, I want to have with you moving forward. I gathered my purse, dignity intact despite my stained dress. Thank you for the birthday dinner. It was certainly memorable. As we walked toward the exit, I heard one woman at a nearby table murmur to her companion, "Good for her." Another nodded approvingly as we passed. Jackson held the door for me, his face a mixture of concern and pride. Mom, are you okay? No, I answered honestly. But I will be. And for the first time in years, I actually believed it. As soon as we were in the car, the adrenaline that had kept me composed in the restaurant began to fade. My hands shook as I tried to insert the key in the ignition. Let me drive, Mom, Jackson said gently. You're too upset. I didn't argue. We switched seats, and as soon as I settled into the passenger side, the tears I'd been holding back spilled over. I'm so sorry, Jackson, I managed between sobs. That was horrible. You shouldn't have had to witness that. Mom, stop. His voice was firm beyond his 15 years. You have nothing to apologize for. Madison was completely out of line, and Aunt Elaine was almost as bad. He navigated out of the parking lot with a confidence that surprised me. When had my son become so grown up? I can't believe she threw her drink at you. He continued, righteous anger evident in his tone. That's like kindergarten-level behavior. Despite everything, I found myself laughing weakly through my tears. Kindergartners usually have better manners. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the events of the evening replaying in my mind. The beautiful restaurant, the tension simmering beneath polite conversation. Madison's escalating rudeness, and finally, the shocking moment when cold liquid splashed across my dress, and those cutting words sliced through the air. Now you look as cheap as you are. Your dress is ruined, Jackson observed sadly as we stopped at a red light. I know how much it meant to you. It's just a dress, I said, though we both knew it represented much more. It had been a symbol of my hard-earned success, a rare indulgence, a statement that I deserved something beautiful. Now it bore the stain of Madison's cruelty and Elaine's tacit approval. By the time we reached our apartment, my tears had subsided, replaced by a hollow feeling of loss, not just for the evening or the dress, but for the relationship with my sister that I'd always hoped could be salvaged. Inside, I went straight to the bathroom to change out of the damp, sticky dress. As I hung it over the shower rod, I wondered if it could be saved. Maybe a good dry cleaner could work magic on the stains. But even if the visible marks could be removed, would I ever wear it again without remembering? This night, I put on comfortable pajamas and washed my face, erasing the carefully applied makeup that had been part of my special occasion transformation. In the mirror, I saw the same Cassandra I saw every day, but something in my eyes had changed. There was a clarity there, a resolve that hadn't been present before. When I emerged, Jackson was in the kitchen making tea. I thought you might want some, he explained, handing me a steaming mug. Chamomile. It's supposed to be calming, right? The simple gesture of care from my son brought fresh tears to my eyes. When did you become the parent? I asked, accepting the tea gratefully. We settled on the couch, the fancy birthday dinner replaced by tea, and the leftover cookies Jackson had baked earlier in the week. I'm sorry your birthday was ruined, he said after a while. It wasn't entirely ruined, I corrected him. The part with you this morning was perfect. Yeah, but you deserved a nice dinner too. He hesitated, then added, You know what Madison said isn't true, right? You're not what she called you. Cheap? I supplied the word he was dancing around. He nodded. You're the most generous person I know, Mom. Not with money because we don't have tons of that, but with everything else. Your time, your attention, your love. You give those things away constantly and never expect anything back. His insight struck me deeply. That's one of the nicest things anyone's ever said to me, Jackson. Thank you. It's just the truth. He shrugged, embarrassed by the emotion of the moment. Aunt Elaine and Madison might have more money, but they're kind of empty, you know? Like all they care about is stuff and status. I think it's more complicated than that, I said, surprising myself with the defense of my sister. Elaine wasn't always like this. When we were kids, she was actually the more sensitive one. Something changed when she married into wealth. It's like she built her entire identity around it. We talked late into the night, a real conversation unlike any we'd had before. Jackson shared his frustrations about feeling judged by his cousin and aunt, his embarrassment about not having the latest gadgets or designer clothes that his wealthier classmates flaunted. I admitted my own insecurities, the constant struggle not to measure my worth by my bank account, in a world that often does exactly that. I don't want you to ever feel ashamed of what we have, I told him. We have enough. We have what matters. I know that, Mom, he assured me. And after tonight, I'm pretty sure I'd rather be us than them, even with all their money. When I finally went to bed in the early hours of the morning, I felt strangely peaceful despite the evening's disaster. Something had shifted inside me. The humiliation of having a drink thrown at me in a public restaurant still stung, but it had also broken something open, allowing me to finally stand up for myself in a way I never had before. The next day at work, word of the incident had somehow spread. Hospital gossip networks were frighteningly efficient. Cassandra, is it true your niece threw a drink at you at Bellini's last night? My colleague Nina asked as soon as I arrived at the nurse's station. I sighed, resigning myself to the fact that my humiliation was now public knowledge. News travels fast. My cousin's girlfriend is a server there, she explained. But she said you handled it like a queen, told off your snobby sister, and walked out with your head held high. Other nurses gathered around offering support and sharing their own tales of family drama. Far from feeling exposed, I found their solidarity comforting. These were my people, hardworking and unpretentious. They understood the value of work that helped others, even if it didn't come with a prestigious title or a massive paycheck. We were going to do cake in the break room for your birthday anyway, Nina said. But now it's also a celebration of you standing up for yourself. That impromptu break room celebration with my colleagues, their genuine warmth and support, felt more meaningful than any fancy restaurant dinner could have been. Later that afternoon, I received a surprising call. The hospital switchboard patched it through to the nurse's station. Cassandra, it's Richard. Do you have a moment? I stepped away for privacy. Richard, I didn't expect to hear from you. I imagine not. He sounded tired. I wanted to call and apologize again properly. What Madison did was inexcusable, and Elaine's response, well, it wasn't adequate. No, it wasn't. I agreed, not making it easier for him. I've had Madison's car privileges revoked and she's starting therapy next week, he continued. This incident made me realize we've been enabling behavior that's, frankly, reprehensible. His candor surprised me. That's good to hear, Richard. Thank you. There was a pause before he spoke again. There's something else you should know. Elaine and I have been having problems for a while now. Her obsession with status, with keeping up appearances, it's created a gulf between us, and I'm afraid we've passed those values on to Madison. I wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected confidence. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be, he said. Last night was a wake-up call in more ways than one. The look on your face when Madison did that, it made me see clearly what our family has become, and I don't like it. After we hung up, I stood for a moment processing the conversation. It was a reminder that appearances could be deceiving. From the outside, Elaine and Richard had the perfect life wealth status, a beautiful home. But perhaps their reality was as complicated and flawed as anyone else's. Over the next few weeks, I thought a lot about my relationship with my sister. I decided that I needed distance, a break from the pattern we'd established over the years. I didn't return her calls immediately, and when I did, I kept our conversations brief and on neutral topics. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about setting boundaries, about showing both of us that I valued myself enough to expect better treatment. During this time, I leaned into the positive relationships in my life. My friends who had heard about the restaurant incident rallied around me, organizing a proper birthday celebration, with a potluck dinner at my friend Megan's house. We may not be able to afford Bellinis, Megan said, as she presented a slightly lopsided but made-with-love birthday cake. But we know how to celebrate someone we love. I also found myself joining a support group for people dealing with difficult family relationships. Hearing others' stories helped me understand that my experience wasn't unique and that setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was necessary for emotional health. Jackson continued to amaze me with his maturity and insight. He'd always been a thoughtful kid, but the incident seemed to have accelerated his growth in some ways. I've been thinking about what happened, he told me one evening as we walked our neighbor's dog for extra money. And I think I feel sorry for Madison. Sorry for her. I was surprised by this perspective. He nodded. She's never going to know what it's like to work for something you know, to really want something and save up for it and finally get it. Everything's just handed to her. And she's so mean because she doesn't know how to be anything else. His compassion humbled me. While I'd been focused on my own hurt, my son had found empathy for the person who had caused it. 6 months after the incident, I received a text from Elaine. Can we meet for coffee, just the two of us? I considered declining, but curiosity and a small persistent hope for reconciliation led me to agree. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown, that was neither too expensive nor too casual. When Elaine arrived, I was struck by how tired she looked. The perfect facade had cracks in it. Thank you for meeting me, she said as she sat down with her latte. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't either, I admitted. There was an awkward silence before she spoke again. Richard and I are in counseling, both marriage counseling and family counseling with Madison. This wasn't what I'd expected her to lead with. That sounds positive, she nodded. It's been illuminating and difficult, really difficult. She took a deep breath. One of the things I've had to confront is how I've treated you over the years. The therapist calls it comparative validation, using your perceived shortcomings to make myself feel better about my own insecurities. I couldn't hide my surprise at her self-awareness. That's quite an insight. I've been jealous of you, Cassandra. The confession seemed to cost her something. Not of your financial situation, obviously, but of other things. Your relationship with Jackson, the respect you've earned in your career, the fact that people genuinely like you for who you are, not what you can give them or what you represent. I had no idea, I said softly, genuinely stunned by this revelation. How could you? I didn't even realize it myself until recently. She stirred her latte unnecessarily. I built my entire identity around being the successful one, the one who made it. But success feels hollow when you don't like the person you've become. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, we had an honest conversation. Elaine talked about the pressure she felt to maintain appearances, the constant fear that Richard's colleagues and their wives were judging her, the exhaustion of always needing to have the best of everything. I shared my struggles as a single mother, the constant juggling of bills, the worry about Jackson's future. Madison's in therapy too, Elaine told me. She's resistant, of course, but the therapist says that's normal. What she did to you. It made us realize we couldn't ignore her behavior anymore. It wasn't just typical teenage attitude. It was cruelty, plain and simple. Has it helped? I asked. Some days I think so. Other days? She shrugged helplessly. She's still a teenager, but she's not allowed on social media right now, and she's volunteering at a homeless shelter on weekends. The therapist recommended experiences that might build empathy. I didn't offer immediate forgiveness, and Elaine didn't ask for it. Instead, we agreed to move forward cautiously, to try to build a healthier relationship one small step at a time. As the one-year anniversary of my disastrous 35th birthday approached, I made a decision. I would celebrate on my own terms in a way that reflected my values and my journey over the past year. I invited a small group friends from work, neighbors, parents of Jackson's friends to a picnic in the park. Nothing fancy, just good food, good company, and genuine conversation. And I bought myself a new dress, not as an attempt to impress anyone else, but as a gift to myself, a recognition of my worth, independent of anyone else's validation. It wasn't as expensive as last year's dress, but I chose it carefully, a deep green that brought out my eyes and made me feel confident. The day of the picnic was sunny and warm. As I watched Jackson setting up the portable grill joking with my friends, I felt a deep contentment. This was wealth-caring people, meaningful connections, the freedom to be myself without apology or pretense. Elaine had sent a birthday card with a gift certificate to a spa, my first non-materialistic gift from her in years. The note inside read simply, "Thinking of you. Lunch sometime." It was a small gesture, but it felt like a step in the right direction. The journey of the past year had taught me something valuable about self-worth. For too long, I had internalized the belief that my financial circumstances somehow made me less than that I needed to apologize for what I lacked, rather than celebrate what I had. The painful public moment when Madison threw her drink and declared me cheap had been a turning point, not because it showed me who my sister and niece were, but because it showed me who I was, someone who deserved respect regardless of the price tag on my clothes or the size of my bank account. As I looked around at the people gathered to celebrate with me, people who valued me for my character, my friendship, my authentic self, I realized that I had finally stopped measuring my worth by standards that were never mine to begin with. I was not defined by my sister's judgment, my niece's cruelty, or society's materialistic values. I was defined by my choices, my relationships, my integrity. And by that measure, I was rich beyond counting. The path to healing my relationship with Elaine might be long, and there would surely be setbacks along the way. But I was approaching it from a position of strength, now not neediness or insecurity. Whether we eventually rebuilt a close sisterhood or maintained a more distant but respectful connection, I would be okay. The drink that stained my dress had washed away something else along with it, the belief that I needed anyone else's approval to recognize my own value. And that realization was the most precious birthday gift I could have received. Have you ever had a moment when someone's cruelty unexpectedly led to your freedom? When an attempt to hurt you actually set you free from something that had been holding you back? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to be reminded of their true worth today. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that your value has nothing to do with your bank account and everything to do with your heart.